Hi, this is Miss Litton, and this is 7th period support for Honors Bio. Say hi.
Hi.
All right, your quiz tomorrow is on Chapter 27 and any additional objectives that are part of that. And Chapter 1. When did I do the Chapter 27 review? Last Thursday. And that is recorded and it is posted. So if you missed that review that was on the calendar for last Thursday, which many of you did, I know, because there was like 9 of you here, I encourage you to watch that review. This is just the Chapter 1 review. So the very first thing we did, is we learned about the characteristics of life. Let us try to review the characteristics of life. Ready? All together now? Here we go. Living things are organized, made of cells. They acquire materials and energy. They maintain homeostasis. They respond to stimuli and reproduce. They grow and develop, and they adapt and die. That is awesome. But I am curious, the very first one, you need to understand all of them in case I ask you a question about it, but the very first one addresses that living things are organized. Let's discuss how they are organized. Please tell that with me. Atoms, molecules, organelles. We're putting organelles in parentheses because not every cell has organelles. Who has organelles? Eukaryotic cells. Okay. Organelles, cells. We're raising up our hands because this is where life starts. Is that you in that?
No.
Oh, okay. Okay. Sorry. Okay. So from the beginning, sorry, I thought he was sandwiched. Atoms, molecules, organelles, cells, tissues, organs, organ systems, organisms. Do it with us.
Population, community, ecosystem, biosphere.
Good. Now, we went through all of those characteristics of life. The first one was being organized. Okay, let's not talk out loud. Okay. Living things are organized, made of cells. Let's talk about the cells, because this will also help us with Chapter 27 as well as this chapter. What are the two kinds of cells? All life, you can divide them into two kinds of cells. What are they? Prokaryotic and eukaryotic. What kind are you? Eukaryotic. How many kingdoms have we talked about that are eukaryotic cells? 4. Animalia. What else? Plantae, fungi, protista. Right? And then the other kind of cell, if you're not eukaryotic, what are you? Prokaryotic. There's 2 domains. Eukaryotic cells are just eukaryote, that domain. Prokaryotic cells have 2 domains. What are the 2 domains? Archaea and bacteria. Bacteria everywhere on you, very, very prolific. Where are archaea? Extremophiles, really hot, really salty, whatever. Methanogens. Good. Okay, so atoms, molecules, organelles, cells, tissue. This is the E from the tissue. Sorry about that. Organs, organ systems, organism, population. That's the same species. If you have a population, community is multiple species. Ecosystems is with the environment, which tend to be what kind of factors? Abiotic factors, which are non-living factors, and then the biosphere is where all living things exist. Okay, living things are organized, made of cells. They what? Acquire materials and energy. The reason why you eat and breathe oxygen is so you can make the energy form for your cells, which is called what? ATP. ATP, which is a type of what? Nucleic acid. Remember, you haven't learned that part. Never mind. Sorry, I'm looking at you and you don't know. Here's another way to acquire materials. We talked about, I'm looking at you like, how come you don't know this? Sorry, because I haven't taught it to you yet. I know, shame. Homeostasis. What's an example of homeostasis? Yes.
Carrying capacity?
Oh, in an ecosystem, yes. In your body, though, yes. Sweating when you are too hot. Or shivering when you're too cold, right? That's keeping you in homeostasis. If you have some snacks with some sugar in it, you're going to secrete some insulin to lower your blood sugar level. If it's too low, you're going to want to raise it. Those are all forms of homeostasis. responding to stimuli. It could be something good, it could be something bad, some sort of threat. One way to respond to stimuli, we talked about this, was behavior. And this is one fish, red fish, blue fish, whatever. But plants also have behavior where they could grow towards the light. We talked about reproducing. For us, it's a union of a sperm and an egg. Growing and developing, and here's an example of that. Growing, develop, what was the next one? Adapt. What are examples of adaptations of a bird? Wings. What else of a bird?
Hollow bones.
Hollow bones for flight. What else? Beaks for whatever they're eating, right? Those are all adaptations, okay, that make them better able to survive. Okay, we talked about when you go up in levels of organization, you gain also skill sets, right? A population of ants can do more than a single ant. Okay, that is an emergent property. We talked about several different adaptations, but we said that natural selection was a mechanism for evolution. Now, when you hear natural selection, who do you hear selecting? Nature is selecting who's best fit for that environment. Those are the ones that are surviving to reproduce. And then just change over time, and going back to these penguins, right? They have wings. Usually when we think of wings, we think of what? Flying, but they use them for swimming. This is a modification of the wings that they had before. Okay? And we'll learn about vestigial structures. That's all coming up. Okay, back to classification. Now that we know what life is, the characteristics of life, how life is organized, how life can change through evolution, now let's characterize our life. So if we're going to do that, let's simplify it right here, right now. What are the domains that we have? Tell me the three domains. Archaea.
Bacteria and eukarya.
Bacteria. So pretty. And eukarya. Okay? What do archaea and bacteria have in common together? What do they have that's the same? They're both prokaryotes. Prokaryotes. What's different about them? Where they live, right? Because archaea are the extremophiles. So what's the same is they're both prokaryotic, but what's different is archaea are those extremophiles. They live where it's really salty or really hot. Bless you. Okay. Eukaryotes, remember we talked about 4 kingdoms, right? What were the 4 kingdoms? Animalia, fungi, what else? Protista, and plantae. Great. What do Animalia and fungi have in common? They're heterotrophs. Yeah, they're heterotrophs. What kind of heterotroph are we, Animalia? Ingestive heterotrophs, whereas fungi are what? Absorptive heterotrophs. Now, all animals are multicellular. Most fungi are multicellular. Plants, they are not heterotrophs. What are they? Autotrophs. Good. And then protista, primarily unicellular. And protista could be an autotroph or a heterotroph, kind of switch hitting single cell. Okay? All right, so now we know about domains and kingdoms. Let's look at that classification. What's the mnemonic that we came up with to remember the classification? Did King Philip come over for good soup? Got to get the good in there, right? All right, now, domain, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. That is how it works. That's the sequence of it. And when we looked at species, okay, it's more and more exclusive, whereas a domain is more and more inclusive, right? Inclusive versus exclusive. And then I asked you to learn man's classification categories. So let's review man's classification categories and how we're going to remember that. First of all, we're going to know we're in the domain eukarya. We're going to remember that because you are a what kind of cell? Eukaryotic cell. So you are in the domain eukarya. You are probably not going to have any trouble remembering animal kingdom because that's a phrase that comes up. So your kingdom. Now, what do you have more of, domains or kingdoms? Kingdoms, right? Kingdoms. And then phylum, remember we said be politically correct if that will help you, or a PC computer. Our phylum is chordata. We looked around the class and we saw all the mammals. If you remember the conversations we had about what a mammal is and why we have hair and breasts. Remember that whole discussion? We learned all kinds of things. Okay, we'll leave that alone. And then order primates. How are we remembering that one? No monkey. We're ordering them around. Okay, the family is always what? Home in a day. The family is home in a day. And then the genus is Homo, but the species you combine the genus species name. So it's Homo sapien, and it's always in, what do you call it when they slant a little bit? Italics. And the genus name is?
Not in italics.
No, it is. Capitalized. And the species name is lowercase. And we're actually Homo sapiens sapien, a subspecies of that. So be comfortable with that. Here's a review of the 3 domains. And we asked the mountain. And then bacteria, very prolific. Prokaryotic cells. Archaea are your extremophiles. And then you want to be familiar, if I describe one of these kingdoms of eukarya, that you can recognize it. So key, bless you. Key for animals is multicellular ingestive heterotroph. Okay? Key for plants is usually multicellular autotrophs. Fungi are usually multicellular, but they are what kind of heterotrophs? Absorptive heterotrophs. And protists are usually unicellular, and they can either be autotrophs or what? Heterotrophs. Good. Okay, and we talked about Linnaeus and that. Okay, then we did a little review. We talked about the biosphere. Okay. And then we kind of broke down, this was all previous units, so that should be we've already reviewed that a little bit about population and communities. We said that nutrients cycle, but energy what? Flows. We always lose a little bit of energy. We already studied that. There's Farmer Ted. We have ideas about him. He modifies ecosystems for his purposes. What are 2 ecosystems we're very concerned about? Rainforest and coral reefs, most diverse, and those are the ones we need to protect. And we talked about what we're going to protect, and that's biodiversity. And that's within the population, genetic biodiversity, right? The species, the different communities, that diversity we want to maintain. And lastly, ecosystem diversity. So we talked about reasons for that, and we'll, at the end of the year, go into more in-depth about that. But if we had one species of bee, and due to colony collapse disorder, if that one species of bee got wiped out, what would we lose? All of our what? The bulk of our pollinators, right? It's not the honey we care about, it's the wheat, the apple, all the crops, right? That we would lose. So we want to have genetic diversity within our bees, right? So that they can withstand some kind of damage to this ecosystem or their way of life. Then we finished off by saying if biology is a study of life, how do we study it? And we study it via the scientific method. So what's the first thing we need to do? We need to make some observations. Good job. And then we might ask a question. So we'll need to do a little bit of research. This would be like the background of your lab. And then we're ready to have a hypothesis. And remember we talked about 2 kinds of hypotheses. Do you remember that? Nope, that's data. Yeah, research is an H1, and then a null hypothesis is H0. Remember, a null hypothesis says there's no correlation. No correlation between the independent and dependent variable. And we started talking about that with the behavior lab last unit, remember? And the research hypothesis, we say there's a connection, like between the amount of light and how many roly-polies you have. Okay, and then what's the 2 types of data you could have? qualitative and quantitative in your experiment, but you have your independent and dependent variable. The independent variable is what you choose. The dependent variable is your data. And then you need to do your what? Analysis. I think it's the refrigerator. You might use chi-square to see if you can support your hypotheses or not, and then you have a conclusion. Good. We reviewed the variables. We reviewed the type of data. We started talking about, I think it's the iPad charger. Look, shake it. Just shake it a little bit. Does it sound like it's the iPad charger?
Our iPad charger does that too.
Oh, okay. All right. Hey, we're almost done. We're almost done. Hey, while you're there, will you plug in that one iPad thing that plugged in? Thank you so much, sweetheart. So science and social responsibility. We talked about technology as the application of scientific knowledge for a practical purpose. And are there any limits to what we do? Should there be ethical considerations for certain experiments? Remember, science is not in charge of making value judgments. Science just does the work. It collects the data. As a society, we need to decide what we're going to do with that information and who gets to know it. And then I think that is it. I think that's it. I'm happy to put the questions on, or here, this part, you should do this. Do your B. We'll do the interactive one. I don't care what you log in as. Okay, and while this is recording, maybe I can have a couple of you do it on the board, so it's recorded the correct way. Brave children. Okay? Log in and then I'll start it, but I need somebody.
My name is that's a little
Don't forget you have a touch screen. Anybody brave enough to do it on the board? Come on, brave children. You're brave. Yeah, get up here, Jordan. Come on, Jordan. What? No, you won't. I know one of them. I'll help you. Come on. Oh my God. Good, Jordan. Help, Jordan. Match the bees.
I know this one, and then it's bacteria.
Oh, to the flower.
I did it.
Keep going.
I don't know the rest.
How about this? Who's an ingestive heterotroph?
Oh, I know that. We are. Right?
Uh-huh.
Just don't eat her own.
Yay. Who's an absorptive heterotroph?
Wait, that was
Very good. Let's see. A multicellular autotroph.
plants.
Perfect. Okay, unicellular eukaryotes.
Is it protista?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, sweet. Is kingdom archaea?
Domain, prokaryotic, and extreme. It's a domain name.
Bino. No.
Who's it?
Archaea.
Yeah, perfect.
Oh shoot, I thought that was kingdom. Is kingdom it's either before phylum or after?
Well, it goes
after.
domain, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species.
Okay, so phylum. Before phylum
What
is
comes
domain.
before phylum?
So,
Before, what comes right before phylum?
kingdom.
Okay.
Oh. I can't. And then after family, which is genus. So genus to family. This one has to be that. Right?
Yeah.
Alright. 100%.
Yay, Jordan. Tell Jordan thank you. Got recorded for you. Okay, I think. Was there another one? Here you go.
Let's go.
Oh, monster quid. Yes.
Do we have some people? Oh, I have some I'm gonna remove you so I know who's here. Only go in once, otherwise it'll screw it up. Excellent.
I should have gone as Satorius. Shoot.
No. Oh, I already Oh, I'm going to pause you. Sorry. Okay, so here are your question review real quick. Just going to scroll through these so you have them to look at if you want to. All right. And then I'm going to end with, don't forget to do your what? Additional. Do you have an ed puzzle that's due tomorrow? Yes. Yes. How will you find out? Yeah, whatever's on the calendar, those are all eligible. All right, have good afternoons, make good choices. You're super smart. You're super smart.